From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Facebook is down, out, and losing money. Kamala Harris's office is doing damage control after exchange with student on Israel. U.S. COVID death toll surpasses 700,000. Social media giants accused of silencing Kashmir voices. Military bases turn to small cities as Afghans wait months for homes in United States. And Belgian Muslims, Jews oppose Halal-Kosher ban. The news is not that Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp are having a massive outage today. The real news broke the night before. Facebook's whistleblower revealed herself. Frances Haugen, a 37-year-old data scientist on CBS News show 60 Minutes, said that Facebook chose profit over safety. She added Facebook is misleading the public on progress against hate speech, violence, and misinformation. She leaked a trove of documents to authorities alleging the company knew its products were fueling hate and harming children's mental health. The world's largest social media platform has been embroiled in a firestorm brought about by Haugen, with US lawmakers and the Wall Street Journal raising sharp criticism of the network. I think that finally now policymakers, maybe the White House, other leaders can look at someone like Frances Haugen and say, it's now incumbent upon us, Facebook will not fix itself, said Nora Benavides, a Facebook accountability expert. Haugen, the whistleblower, is set to testify Tuesday on Capitol Hill over Facebook and Instagram's impact on young people. Vice President Kamala Harris's office is trying to do damage control with American Zionist organizations after an exchange about U.S. funding for Israel last week. The exchange was between Harris and a student who called Israel's actions towards Palestinians ethnic genocide. Harris took questions while visiting a political science class Tuesday at George Mason University. One student brought up U.S. funding of Israel and its continued displacement of Palestinians. Harris, whose husband, Doug Emhoff, is Jewish, said that the student's voice, perspective, experience, and truth cannot be suppressed and must be heard. She encouraged healthy debates about both the Middle East and foreign policy. It led to a flurry of complaint calls from, amongst others, Democratic Majority for Israel, the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, and the Anti-Defamation League. William Deroff is CEO of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. He told CNN Harris's failure to correct the student left the impression that the Biden administration is not committed to a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. In a statement following the exchange, Harris's spokeswoman, Simone Sanders, said, the vice president strongly disagrees with the student's characterization of Israel. The U.S. COVID death toll has surpassed 700,000 people, with more than 44 million infections. Dr. Anthony Fauci, chief medical advisor to President Joe Biden, emphasized on Sunday the need for the 70 million eligible Americans to get immunized. Fauci was enthusiastic about Merck's new antiviral pill, but warned Americans should not wait to get vaccinated. Merck claims the pill could cut the risk of hospitalization and death due to COVID by half. A federal judge on Friday sentenced Stephen Donziger, a human rights lawyer, to 6 months in prison after more than 2 years of house arrest. Donziger was found guilty of contempt charges related to a lawsuit he filed decades ago against oil giant Chevron. The ruling was condemned by environmental justice advocates and other progressives. Donziger, a former environmental lawyer, represented a group of farmers and indigenous people in the Lago Agrio region of Ecuador in the 1990s. This was a lawsuit against Texaco. The lawsuit accuses Texaco, later acquired by Chevron, of contaminating soil and water by deliberate dumping of billions of gallons of cancer-causing waste into the Amazon. A report by Kashmiri diaspora group accuses Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and other social media platforms of silencing Kashmiri voices and related content. The social media giants frequently suspend accounts of artists, academics, and journalists based in and outside the disputed region, according to the report. Stand with Kashmir's report revealed India topped the list of 129 countries with internet shutdowns. 109 of the 155 of the internet shutdowns occurred there. A spokesperson told Al Jazeera, since August 2019, the level of censorship of Kashmiri voices in person, but also on social media, has only increased. About 53,000 Afghans have been living at American military bases since their chaotic evacuations from Kabul this summer after the end of the 20 years of conflict. It is the largest evacuation of war refugees since the Vietnam War. U.S. officials say that the delays are due to a measles outbreak, medical checks, and a vaccination campaign, as well as the need to complete immigration processing. Most U.S. bases are at or near capacity. Afghan evacuees waiting at bases in the Middle East, Spain, and Germany can be flown in once space opens up. A new poll by Vox and Data for Progress, conducted September 17th to the 20th, found that 74% of likely voters favored resettling Afghans who were U.S. military allies, such as translators or special forces. In related news, Hamdi Ulukaya, the Muslim American founder and CEO of Chobani, in a release encouraged corporate America to support settling Afghan refugees. He said, "They have stood by our side and we must stand by theirs." The Jewish Federations of North America is launching a $54 million campaign to equip Jewish communities with the resources and know-how needed to secure their institutions. American Jewish communities have increasingly been targets of anti-Semitic harassment and violence in the past year. The 3-year Live Secure campaign aims to ensure each of the 146 communities with a Jewish Federation has a community security initiative. Israel's President Isaac Herzog, speaking at the Jewish Federation's annual General Assembly on Sunday in New York, stressed the need to ensure that Jews in America and across the globe are safe. Herzog underscored the importance of reinforcing ties between North American Jewish communities and Israel. Twitter has restricted the account of long-standing Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid. The social media giant cited unusual activity on Mujahid's account as reason for curbing it. It was imposed minutes after Mujahid condemned a deadly bomb blast Sunday in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. Mujahid is now the Deputy Minister of Information and Culture for the Taliban government. 8 people were killed and 20 wounded in the bombing at a mosque, according to media reports. Jewish and Muslim organizations are coming together to oppose Belgium's ban on religious slaughtering. Belgium's constitutional court last Thursday upheld the country's ban on slaughtering animals that have not been stunned beforehand. Jewish and Muslim religious dietary laws do not allow for stunning animals. The ban effectively makes kosher and halal slaughter practices illegal. The Executive Council of Muslims of Belgium and the Coordinating Council of Islamic Institutes of Belgium are considering an appeal to the European Court of Human Rights, the Brussels Times reported. Rabbi Pinchas Goldsmith, president of the Conference of European Rabbis, said that the court's rulings aligns Belgium with countries whose bans on religious slaughter date from the Nazi era. Diplomatic discord between Algeria and France has deepened after Algiers banned French military planes from its airspace. It is the latest escalation of a row over visas and critical comments from French President Emmanuel Macron. France's jets regularly fly over the former French colony to reach the Sahel region of Western Africa. French soldiers are engaged in the so-called War on Terror there. Tensions flared on Saturday when Algerian government recalled its ambassador to France, citing inadmissible interference in its affairs. The French daily Le Monde reported Macron made critical remarks about Algeria during a meeting Thursday with descendants of French collaborators from the War of Independence. Macron reportedly said Algeria's official history has been totally rewritten based on hatred towards France. French sources suggested that France killed around 500,000 Algerians, while Algerian sources claimed that as many as 1,500,000 died in its brutal war of independence against French colonizers, which ended in 1962. Thousands of ethnic Tatars have fled Crimea for mainland Ukraine since 2014, when Russia occupied the country. The Muslim minority opposed Russia's takeover, fearing a repeat of Soviet-era repressions like the mass deportations of Tatars. Today, many among those fleeing say their fears of Kremlin rule are being borne out. Most of Crimea's approximately 300,000 Tatars boycotted a dispute vote set up by Moscow in 2014 on integrating with Russia. Authorities cracked down hard on the Turkic minority after the takeover. Russia banned its traditional assembly, the Mejlis, closing a Tatar television channel and detaining activists. Almost a century ago, under Joseph Stalin, Tatars were accused of collaborating with Nazi Germany and deported to Central Asia. Nearly half died of starvation or disease. The survivors began returning under the former Soviet Union's last leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, in the 1980s. They became Ukrainian nationals after the independence in 1991. This was followed by Russia's annexation. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad!
you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Abu Zubaydah has been a prisoner at Guantanamo Bay for 15 years. He's asking the Supreme Court to allow his lawyers to depose two men who oversaw his torture. To discuss this in detail, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. America does some amazing thing, and one of the terrible amazing thing is that there is a person who is in American custody for 20 years. First, it was declared that he is third in command for Al-Qaeda. Now CIA has determined that no, he is not even a member of Al-Qaeda. He has never been tried, never been charged, nothing, but he's sitting, it seems forever, in some secret corner of Guantanamo Bay. To discuss what is the situation of Abu Zubaydah and why he's going through that, we have a person who has been fighting for his cause, or actually his attorney, Professor Mark Denbo. He's an American attorney and professor at Seton Hall University Law School. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you very much.
So tell us why your client, who has not been charged with anything, you're unable to get him out.
Well, the most specific reason, working backwards, is that when he was captured on March 28, 2002, President Bush was hopeful they had finally captured an important al-Qaeda person. He was the first person captured by the CIA. And when they learned of it, they told the president, he then announced they'd caught the number 2 or the number 3 al-Qaeda, that he was a terrible person, that he'd been involved in terrorist activities, and that at a certain point, he was now captured and he would never do it again. The problem with that was that it was, of course, untrue, but it was not so shocking that the president would have been fooled by that information, because all of America was scared and making foolish decisions. The problem was when they learned he was never a member of Al-Qaeda, and when they learned he'd never engaged in terrorist activities, and then they didn't know what to do, because he was the first person captured by the CIA, and the CIA needed to set up a torture program, and they got approval for these various torture techniques from the Justice Department, but then they needed somebody to torture. And so they needed to have a very bad person to torture. So the Justice Department would say, okay, you can use these techniques because he's such a terrible person. So they made a series of lies. They said he was the number 2 al-Qaeda or the number 3. Sometimes they said he was equal to Osama bin Laden. They said he'd been involved in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. He'd been involved in attacks around the world and a series of other things. And the problem with that was the only time the government ever alleged any of those acts was in a memo that the CIA prepared on July 28, 2002, to give the Department of Justice, to persuade the Department of Justice to allow them to torture him. The facts in that memo, which you've referred to, were all untrue. And in fact, they were never, ever cited again as true. But instead, everybody referred to those as if they were true, and they believed it was true. The public did, although it was completely false. And the bottom line is that just before he was tortured, and that was in August 2nd, it was about to begin the torture, the torturers sent a memo, a cable to the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, saying, we want assurances that if Abu Zubaydah dies during this interrogation, that he'll be cremated immediately. That may bring to memory another person who was cremated immediately. And the second thing they said was, and if he doesn't die, we want assurances that he will be held incommunicado for the rest of his life. The reason he's being held incommunicado now is because they tortured him. And it's especially embarrassing because not only did they torture the wrong person, as the FBI has pointed out, they knew he was the wrong person, and they lied in order to get the torture program set up. It's that lie that the CIA made in order to get America to approve a torture program that had never had before is the reason why he's still detained. Nobody claims he's ever committed any crimes, any terrorist acts. He is a warrior. He's a Mujahideen fighter who will fight anybody who's occupying the lands of the faithful. And he was doing that in Afghanistan first against the Russians, or the Russians were just leaving. He was when he arrived there. And then it was the communist puppet regime that the Russians left in place that he was fighting. His skull was fractured by a Russian hand grenade, and he was badly injured, so he could never be engaged in combat anymore. But he is a very smart person and was very helpful at helping the former Mujahideen fighters return to their homeland once the Russians left. And he would help them find travel documents so they could return home. And the government apparently believed that the man who was preparing travel documents, who they believed was Al-Qaeda, was actually the travel agent for Al-Qaeda and moving Al-Qaeda people into other cells around the world. He wasn't, they weren't. They returned to their home countries, whether it was England or anywhere else, and went on with their lives. But that's the story that drove them to catch him. And after they caught him, they had to make up a story to get permission to torture. And then they tortured him. And the worst part is he's not the only one they tortured. Once the torture program was established, then it was used on what the government admits and can name 119 other people who were tortured, most of whom have been released, virtually all of them.
So he's the only one who is still in detention while other people who were tortured were released. So CIA is not afraid of those people telling their story. So why not let this guy go? I mean, is there any court, any law, any procedure which a person who has not done any terrorism, a person who is not even a member of Al-Qaeda, can be out?
Well, let me put it this way. I think that's a very important question, and so does he. But the truth is, as best I can figure out, he's a unique embarrassment. It's not just he was tortured. He was the first person tortured. And they invented a character called Abu Zubaydah to create America's torture program. And, America's embarrassed about having a torture program. It's the first one we ever had. Hopefully we won't have any more. And it's an ugly, ugly stain on America. And what they really don't want is the American people to understand fully that the torture program was created to torture somebody who they said was a terrible person, but whom they knew was not. It's the fact they knew they were making up lies is what keeps them having him locked up, because it's the lies, the knowing lies, that are in fact the huge embarrassment. Any country makes mistakes. America makes mistakes. But there's a difference between that and having the CIA make lies in order to create a torture program. That's not a mistake.
Professor, tell us, if the torture program started with him, what were the torture mechanism? We hear a whole lot about the waterboarding. It seems like a play. What it is? What is it?
What is it?
Yeah,
waterboarding?
Waterboarding.
Well, the law is, see, what they did when they established the fact that he had to be held incommunicado for the rest of his life, it meant that eventually when the lawyers became involved, the lawyers were able to meet with him. That was years later. And what's really happened is Since he was captured, the only people he's ever been allowed to talk to are his torturers, his jailers, and his lawyers, which is effectively me. And so we're the only people who can talk to him, but a condition of our being allowed to talk to him is that we're not allowed to report what he tells us. I know him very well, and he's nothing like what any people try to pretend. And so I know him in that sense. I can tell you things that are in the public record that I am confident were truly done to him. So, for instance, there's no doubt he was waterboarded. There are plenty of records describing the fact he was waterboarded that are mentioned in the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, for instance. Waterboarding, apparently, there are no rules for what counts as waterboarding. People would do different things to different people at different times. But what it effectively was making people think they were drowning. If you can imagine some variation of this, you're on a board, your feet are up and high and elevated, you're lying back, your head is fastened to the board so it can't move it. And then they can either pour water down your face through your nose and your mouth so you eventually fill up, or perhaps they could even dip you down so your head is in water. And then you believe you're going to drown. And then they lift you up. And then they let you catch your breath and do it again, over and over and over again. It's brutal. It's hard to imagine.
But Professor, this person went through, other person went through, but isn't this true that in the World War II, the United States determined that waterboarding is a crime against humanity and a war crime?
I don't remember their saying waterboarding was that. I don't remember which of the specific ones. Remember, there's 10 techniques used on my client. Waterboarding is only one. And basically let me try it this way. The world has never been able to invent a new and better torture, right? Whether the Romans wanted to torture people or the Florentines in Renaissance Italy wanted to, or in China, or during North Korea, and the Germans, and many other places. Everybody believes that the trick in life is to catch your enemies and make them tell you the truth. And if they all believe, they're trying to find a secret way to compel people to tell the truth. And of course, there aren't any. So everybody tries them over and over and over again. It doesn't matter if you pull out their fingernails or you hit them or you starve them. They're all just attempts to make people talk. And the big problem is, as is admitted, that anybody who's captured will talk. Nobody can resist. And so what ends up happening is people in organizations such as Al-Qaeda knew that when somebody was captured, they would talk. It wasn't even considered a violation of any obligation to talk. Maybe you could delay a little while, wait, let people move to different locations, but everybody was going to talk. And they all admitted. There was never a question they weren't going to talk. Abu Zubaydah had been interrogated by the CIA and the FBI since March 28th, and the torture program started on August 2nd. And during that time, he was interrogated, and interrogation and the difference between that and torture or aggressive interrogation is very insignificant sometimes. And the FBI was there too. The FBI quit in June and refused to be involved in what they were doing because they felt it was illegal.
Professor, tell us that you, referring to you, different media has published the drawing of Abu Zubaydah. That's how he was tortured. So why the US government allowed you to have his drawing while they don't want you to talk about what he tells you?
Well, that's a complicated story, and I just soon keep that secret to myself.
Oh, okay.
We did get it. We got it legally. Not all the detainees were able to do it, and I'm not sure the government wishes they had allowed us to do it. But once we got them, we made them public so everybody knows.
All right. So what future looks like for your client?
Well, I'm a lawyer, I'm an optimist, and I always expect to win. Doesn't mean I always win, but I expect to. I expect to meet him without being chained to the floor as a free man somewhere, hopefully in the next few years. I'm 78. I can't afford to take too long to get him out if I'm going to meet him. I think President Biden may well make a big difference. Right now, there are procedures going on where some people who are currently being detained are being approved for release by an administrative proceeding. His case is before that administrative proceeding. Maybe he'll be approved for release. You know, it's no longer clear that the CIA even wants to cover up what it was doing 20 years ago. They may be perfectly willing to have it out. The Biden administration may want to clear the air and make it clear what America did and make clear that knowing what we did should be a basis to never do that again.
Well, thank you so much, Professor, for your time and your commitment to get people out and have a legal process available for them.
You're welcome. And I'm sure Abu Zubaydah would be glad to know that people want to hear about him.
Thank you. And back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid and Mr. Denbo. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.